Hello everybody. Today I'm going to show you how you can take a giant slab and turn it into a tube, which you can do a lot of different things with. So some examples of some tube constructed forms. This is a piece. You can see the tube on the inside, that basic form, and then they added a lot of pieces to the surface. This was also created using the tube construction form, and then there were pieces pressed out while the clay was soft and pushed in to change the shape so that it's a little bit more modified. The next and final one, this is another one that was tube constructed, and instead of keeping it really round, they morphed it, they cut into it, added texture. So you can do a lot of things with this technique. But the first step is to roll your slab. In my last video, I showed you how to use the slab roller, or you can use the rolling pins in the more traditional way. So before getting started, I'm going to just add a little bit of water to the surface, basically just cleaning my slab and adding a little bit of water so that when I bend it, it doesn't crack. It's nice to do that to both sides, just to kind of clean up the edges. If you notice a lot of cracks or bumps or texture in it, you can also take your rib tool and just go over the surface. This compresses the clay, pushes the moisture into it. Okay. So now I've got to think about what shape tube I want to use for this process. So it doesn't matter the height, you don't have to use the full height, but more so it matters the diameter of the circle. So when you look at it, your clay isn't going to be the same as that tube. Your clay will sit on the surface, so it'll be about as big as you can see my fingers around. So the diameter will end up being about this big. So just keep that in mind when you choose. So if I were to choose this one, the piece wouldn't be ultimately this big, it would sit around, so it would be even bigger. Okay? Your tube, whatever you choose, and I'm gonna choose this kind of medium size one, you've gotta take some newspaper and cover the tube, otherwise your clay will stick to the board. So I'm just gonna use my newspaper, wrap it around, and I will save this to the side for when I'm ready. So I need a ruler, and I also need a knife so that I can cut the edges. Right now this slab is kind of a oblong shape. It's not really perfected. So at the bare minimum, you want that bottom edge to be super straight because that's gonna sit directly on the table. So I'm gonna take my ruler and I'm gonna cut a straight line along the edge. Okay, so I cut off that little extra bit. Now I'm ready to use that end. I'm also gonna cut one straight end off to the side here. So this will be one side of the clay. And now as far as what I have up at the top, you could leave it really organic. You could cut it straight. You could cut a pattern. For now, I'm just gonna cut it into a basic rectangle. It's okay if things aren't perfect at this stage because there's a lot of other work that you'll do on the surface after. So if it's not a perfect rectangle, you're okay. All right, so I haven't cut this one yet. I don't know how much clay I'll need to go around, so I'm just gonna leave it for now. I'm gonna lay my tube down on the surface. I think I'll turn this so you can see a little bit at a different angle. Laying my tube down, and I'm laying it right on the edge, this bottom edge of the clay, right at one end. Okay, so now I'm gonna take and I'm gonna slowly pull my clay up so that it wraps around the tube with the newspaper. All right, so I wrapped all the way around. I'm just gonna turn it so you can see again. Now what happens here, you wanna have a little bit of extra clay so that you can get a nice slip and score seam and cover it up. So I'm not gonna cut it right where I see this one ending. I'm gonna cut a little bit extra. Okay, and now I'm ready to stand it up, and you can see they overlap just by about an inch, okay, at that seam. It's a very important seam. I'm gonna go and slip and score, right? So it'll be the inside of one, the outside of another. And I'm gonna put tons and tons of slip on there. All right, now I can take, and starting at the bottom, I'm gonna press my slab over the top, trying to keep it nice and tight. And you don't really need a Band-Aid coil for this if you have this extra clay. If you notice what I'm doing with my fingers, I'm actually smoothing the clay in as I go to connect it to the form. Now in this one spot, you can really see your seam, but the more you work on it, the more you can get it to go away. So I'm gonna go back to using that rib tool and I'm just gonna smooth it in. Okay, the one thing you wanna be careful of here is you don't wanna pinch the clay and make it really thin. That's why I was kind of smoothing it around. And when I do this too, I'm not trying to put a lot of pressure on, I'm just trying to get rid of those lines so it doesn't show. All right, so I have my basic form. The nice thing about the newspaper is I can pull this tube out, and then if I need to, I could insert it again. But the newspaper can stay in there just to give it a little bit of support. And in my next video, I'll show you what we can do with this form.